Okay, we are live. John Reed, I'm back. For those of you who missed me for a couple of weeks, yeah, I was on other people's video shows. I've learned the hard way I can't do my show in other people's shows. So that's what happened. Hopefully I won't get invited on any shows for a while. Anyhow, this time I got Bonnie Tinder back from Raven Intel. How we doing?
Great. Glad to be here on a Friday afternoon.
Bonnie's going to be revealing some fresh statistics and analysis on the keys to project success, which we all need more of. So this is going to be a fun reveal. Bonnie, thank you for preparing your data for us today. You've got top 10 keys to project success coming out in this show. That's going to be fun.
Absolutely. We'll talk about those telltale metrics to know if projects were success or failure in some cases.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna piggyback on my my stump speech. I have these like things. I have to be careful because sometimes I grind on them too much. Like people start feeling like, oh, you keep talking about this. But lately, it's been about smaller SIs and why they don't get nearly enough attention, and that they deserve a lot more consideration by customers than the household names that we can all conjure up. This has obviously happened in the context of my SAP Rise coverage because I've been asking where the smaller consultancies are there, but this is a broader concern than SAP. And Bonnie has some interesting data that backs up my arguments, which is really cool. So looking forward to getting into that a little bit as well. And it's been a very eventful week because a longtime colleague that has influenced both of our thinking, Jarrett Pozahonik, has ridden off into the hills. He's announced his retirement from SAP consulting and being a provocateur in the community to advocate for better projects. And he became famous for his contempt for what he called the Wild West of SAP consulting. But his concern was always around, why are customers getting taken for a ride with systems integrators and such that are not providing value, and why can't vendors like SAP get that under control? So now that Jarrett's gone, we're going to have to carry on and try to fix these projects, Bonnie. So
that's right. I mean, we can never replace Jarrett. I mean, he has a special place, and he always will in the HR type community and the enterprise software community. But we'll do our best, right?
We will try to carry on. But Jarrett, that tribute's for you, man. Wish you luck as you yourself ride off into that particular sunset and find new projects, which I'm sure you will. But anyhow, if you guys have questions or comments, as usual, this is a show where you don't save your comments to the end. I was on another webinar just yesterday. We'll try to take your questions at the end. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, post your questions and comments continuously so you can get them answered, but just be careful because I am going to address them. So be careful what you say because I'm going to respond. Anyhow, before we get into Bonnie's countdown, I just want to provide a little bit of background. First of all, Bonnie has been on the show before where we talked about notorious project success tips and also mistakes that are made. But I want to provide a little bit of background here. Bonnie, why do you do what you do? Like, what is it that Raven Intel does, and why do you care about it? Why do you think it matters?
At the heart of our business is all about taking the voice of the customer and amplifying it so that other customers make a good decision in a partner. So Raven Intel is a peer review site, meaning that we get customer feedback after they complete a project, an enterprise software project. So they go through an implementation or a migration, something like that. We ask them a series of questions about how that project was. And, the main thing that we're solving for, and the reason I wanted to start this business was I wanted implementations to suck less for customers. I mean, implementations are really hard. As we see the aftermath and of really bad implementations happen because a lot of them hit the news wires. And I just wanted to make it easier for customers to prepare themselves as well as choose the best partner that's the best fit for them, knowing sort of what the previous experience and track record that an SI has. And before Raven, nobody was looking at this information. Nobody was looking at this project work. And I just really wanted customers to know what they didn't know before they started on one of these big implementations, or we call them digital transformations, what have you. But I wanted people to have like a perspective on who's good and who's not.
Brian Summer knows a thing or two about this. By the way, folks, if you hear too much of an echo during our broadcast, just type in the word echo, and then Bonnie will have to then put on her headset. But I'm letting Bonnie try without her headset. We'll see how it goes. Brian says clients really need an advocate when evaluating between SIs and implementers. That's absolutely true, Brian. In fact, I just think that's been a big gap overall in product success. I know, Brian, you have filled that void in certain instances, and Bonnie has certainly dedicated her business to that. And hi, LinkedIn user. I know who you are. Happy Friday. Thanks for coming back. I'm sure you'll have a few interesting comments. So Bonnie, you primarily started out in the HCM cloud space, right? But you're not limiting yourself to that. Is that right?
That's right. So I've spent my entire career, 20 plus years in the HCM or HR tech world. And so that's really where I started when, I started this business. Although we look at enterprise software projects now beyond just HCM. So we're looking at full ERP implementations, whether it's, SAP or Oracle, any number of those software packages, Unit 4, we look at their implementation success. So we've really scaled beyond HCM, but certainly that's where we got our start.
This is kind of one thing that's been on my mind as far as like you think about like the rise of user reviews and user ratings, like kind of a phenomenon across industries, right? And we've seen a lot of it in the enterprise software arena, though largely I would argue like the big sites like G2 are more value in the small business segment where software can be a little more genericized. I don't think those rating services are having the same impact yet on large enterprise projects, though it is changing, and in certain categories they are. But we've always said, where are the consulting ratings, right? And there's been so many false starts in our industry. I could go back to like 1997 to the first phone call I got of someone who was excited starting their own consultant rating business. But this is really at the heart of it, right? Which is that customers are having a variety of experiences with consulting firms, and there should be some accountability around that. And how do we create a culture of accountability? And one way is through peer reviews, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, sites like G2 Crowd or Gartner Peer Insights, there's lots of them. They were really looking at user reviews about the software. And that's a very different sort of, experience that they're measuring versus we're looking at the implementation effort, the adoption of the software, and the effort to get that software live. So what we're looking at is very different. If you were a customer that was looking to implement a big enterprise software, you might be able to see what do people think about it from a user perspective, but you would never understand from an overall implementation perspective, who is the consultant responsible for that? What does their track record look like? That's just not the way that those sites are organized, and that's really the hole that Raven Intel fills.
Right. And we could talk more about this as far as this whole notion of what constitutes success metrics, right? Because I would argue that what you're undertaking with your firm is trying to develop what those metrics should really look like. And we still, I think, I would argue we're in a fairly early stage in understanding what, I know this sounds crazy because we're at enterprise software for a long time, but I think we're in the early stages of really defining what the right metrics are. We'll talk a little bit later about go live as a metric, but I think that's one metric, but it's fairly limited, right? Like you hit your go live on time. My departed beloved friend Michael Doan used to rail against this because he was like, yeah, you hit your go live, but you didn't really achieve anything. So I think it's just interesting how we're still in the early stages of gathering the proper data to say, here's how we can define project success,
That's right. And it's a mixture of, how should I say, discrete data and what I would consider more opinion or customer sentiment. We can measure, like, did the project get delivered on time, but it's not the say and end all of, was it successful or was it delivered on budget? Those are two components of it. But I have customers whose projects were late and over budget, but still were satisfied with the end result. And they would rate their partner and the project well. It achieved the mission. It just, there's lots of reasons behind those two delivery points. And I think you're looking at service delivery. There's several components that you need to look at beyond just some of that discrete data. Was it delivered on time, on budget? Those type of things.
And I think Brian is really hitting at the core of this issue when he raises this question for you. Are the fast implementation methodologies really viable to deliver value for large firms? Because when you end up obsessed with on time, then you get into these rapid implementation methods, but they don't always really cut to the heart of things. What do you think?
I would agree with, there's ways to do rapid installs that is a complete lift and shift, and you gain no benefit from a new piece of software. In those situations, you can say, hey, I've gone live on time. It was rapid. I did it in, 90 days, whatever that timetable, that is rapid to you is. But that doesn't mean that was a successful project if you have to do a ton of rework over the course of the next year to get it where it needs to be. So, in general, the rapid implementations, customers rate them lower than those that, provided ample time to make sure that things were tested, there was change management, and that, they were able to sort of bite off the larger, process changes to make that implementation successful. The rapid stuff, typically isn't as successful.
We've got Mark Sweeney here. He's not a fan. Fast implementation methodologies is a race to the bottom of the rate card. So I think I would argue that's an appropriate level of cynicism around so-called fast implementation methodologies. Though I will say that one thing I do think, in defense of some of this, is that vendors used to have these elaborate as is to be, parts of the project that would take months to whiteboard everything. And I do think that was kind of a waste. And so I did appreciate some of the pressure on becoming more efficient, but you can certainly get way overboard with that. We got another regular, sometimes snarky visitor. Thomas says, it is avoiding the rate card. The fastest implementation works without an SI. Well, we may get to that, Thomas, when we get into Bonnie's data. And Brian, you're asking a tons of questions. I'm going to get to your questions, but Brian, just bear with me a little bit. I want to get to a few things with Bonnie, but I will get to your questions as well. Looks like we're going to have a vigorous chat today. People are back in action. Glad to see you guys. So this is good. So before we go on, I just want to give you a chance to do a shameless plug, because you're not some huge systems integrator. You're Bonnie Tinder. So if a customer needs help evaluating like firms that they could use, is that where you could step in? Is that a key role that you would play?
Absolutely. The beauty of Raven Intel is it's a free resource for a customer to look for a partner and to vet the partners that they might have and want to shortlist. And so all of the research that is out on our site, you can read all of our reviews for free. And so it really is a benefit for a customer or a procurement team to be able to have this additional set of information during a selection process. The other thing that especially for customers is important, and we were going to talk about like the 10 telltale metrics around a project. We want customers to come in and write reviews about their projects so that, number one, they can help other customers make the right decision and they can rate the partner that they chose. It really gives customers a voice, but the questions that we ask are really indicative to sort of look at your project overall and say, was this successful or not? I mean, those metrics that we're going to talk about are actually outlined in our review. So I would encourage, any customer that's gone through a project, do a post-mortem internally, and you can use the Raven review as like a guide in terms of answering those questions and also helping others while you're going through that post-mortem. So those are, I think, two big keys. Both, we have resources if you're making a decision, but also if you've gone through a project, we really would covet your information in terms of like what wisdom would you impart to another customer, so you can help others with your wisdom.
So a couple more things. So we got Mark Sweeney saying, if you want value for money, look to the specialist SMEs every time. Mark, we're going to get to that. You're preaching to my choir, so keep preaching. Neil Radin, it's great to see you in here. Neil, by the way, has written some very cutting edge and important articles on Diginomica, on AI and ethics, and why that field is so deeply flawed. Thanks, Neil. He points out here, I have to talk to a client that's given me documentation for blowing the ocean in a little over 2 years, every buzzword you can think of. Yeah, and to me, that's where I start to make the argument for more fast-track methodologies, is when clients got too hung up on this type of arduous documentation, because we now know that by the time you finish that, your entire business circumstances change anyway. You probably have been acquired or acquired somebody else, and everything is back to square one anyhow. So Mark is also putting in a plug for your article in ERP Today. So if anyone wants to post a link to that in the chat, we will put that out to all the viewers. And Brian Summer, you're bringing up blockchain. Don't do that, Brian. You know that I don't allow blockchain in this group as part of my show, so just stop it with the blockchain. Brian's advocating blockchain as the solution for customer accountability on projects with us SIs. I wish it were true. I wish he were really believing that, but no one does. So moving on. I do want to let Bonnie finish her shameless plug. And if you don't like Bonnie's shameless plug time, I just have to tell you, there's a bunch of big fish analyst firms with deep pockets out there that she's competing with. And I believe in what she's doing. So I'm going to give her a chance to amplify what she's doing. So if you don't like it, sorry. But I do want to show you that Bonnie's got a bunch of Ravens. So she's really backing up the brand too. She's got a ton of Ravens on her desk. So
that's right. And shameless plug here, ravenintel.com is where you go, and you can find all of our research there.
Okay.
And certainly, all of the stuff that we do is independent, and we are not Gartner, we're not Forrester. What we do is the legit voice of the customer. So just don't do any quadrants or trapezoids, and I'll continue to support you.
As soon as we have quadrants and trapezoids, then no. But anyhow, we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
So all right. So we have a couple of things here. Before we get into your top 10, we also have a graphic, although I guess I could probably share my screen and show it, but you did a thing, because you were responding to my thing on smaller SIs, and you did some data around product satisfaction and delivery by consulting type. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So we ask a customer to rate their overall satisfaction with a project, and then we have several other KPIs. What we've done is sliced out all of our reviews by three main groups: the global consultancies, and those are ones that you probably think of as the big 5, 6, etc. They're the ones that have the big brand names and over 1,000 consultants in general. You have then the independent SIs, and the way that we would define those is more of the specialists, the independents that focus on maybe one or two product lines, but they're the specialists in either a function like human resources or with a certain product line, being SAP or UKG or Workday, etc. So those are the independents. And then finally, we look and broke out the reviews that we have by projects completed by a software vendor themselves. So that means that the customer never used a third party. They just went straight with their software vendor to do the project. And in general, what we wanted to see was, which are rated the highest out of 10 Customers rate their project a 1 out of 10. The best rated or the highest rated in all of those three categories were the independent SIs. And those are the specialists, as John, you referred to them earlier. Those averaged out of 10, an 8, essentially. And in general, those projects were more likely to be on budget by 17%. So if you went with an independent SI, you'd be more likely, based on our review data, to have your project delivered on budget by 17%. So that's essentially it. Versus the global consultancies, so the big guys, those were rated slightly less, and that was around a 7.1 out of 10 in general with the satisfaction. The one thing to note there, though, is that those implementations typically tend to be more global, more complex, longer in nature, and so those were those are a little bit tougher to say. Well, we can just make a broad brush here. So those were representative of a little bit more challenging type of implementation. Not to say that the independents didn't also have global implementations, but it just represented a larger range, including smaller domestic sort of projects.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and say that a large SI can never complete a great project. I mean, what my stump speech is more about that customers should open up to a broader range of vendors during the evaluation process and decide which one is best. And I think your data supports that argument on my part. So I'm really happy to see that, because I would have been really sad if you had data that contradicted that. Mark Finneran. Hey, Mark. Good to see you, man. Mark. What an endorsement of Bonnie Tinder by Jared Pozahana, who we touched on earlier, giving her the ownership of his global SAP and SuccessFactors community, 19K. Yes, indeed. And in fact, Jared, it's kind of confusing, but Jared had two LinkedIn groups that were both global SAP SuccessFactors and HR groups. One of them is 30K, one of them is 20K. Bonnie now owns the 20K group by herself. She's running that, but she's going to be expanding it beyond SAP, right? So you want to just briefly say what you're going to do there?
Absolutely. So we're expanding the conversation to also include other HCM tech vendors and Oracle, Workday, UKG, and others. So the idea is really to bring in a broader audience and talk about enterprise project success and open up the community a little bit more.
Yeah, and Mark, to your point, I'm one of the owners of Jared's 30K group, but Jared didn't trust me to run it by myself, so I have 9 other co-moderators. So that gives you a sense of how much he trusted Bonnie. He needs 9 other people to look after me. So but I probably should have some adult supervision, so it's fine. But anyhow, it's cool, and the nice thing about that too is there'll be more clarity about what those two groups are and aren't, right? Because the larger one will remain SAP SuccessFactors focused, and the one you're building, which will probably be bigger soon than the other one, is going to be a broader HCM community around a number of vendors. So anyhow, that's the LinkedIn scuttlebutt that you need to know. Josh raises this point, and the vendors, hi Josh Greenbaum. By the way, if you care about project quality, you should also talk with Josh about his ProQ initiative, or check the podcast I did with Josh. Josh, there's your shameless plug. The vendors should support the smaller SIs instead of kowtowing to the GSIs. Yes. In fact, Josh has blogged about this topic, but indeed, vendors, unfortunately, often hand out self-serving awards to large SIs, and they keep the smaller SIs off the keynote stage, which again does a disservice to customers who should be exposed, in my opinion, to specialist SIs. And by the way, part of the reason I feel that way is I believe that the future of consulting is going to be much more industry specific and verticalized. And that's one reason why I think specialist SIs are going to become more and more important. But,
I absolutely agree with that statement. On the other hand, it's tough for a customer to, risk going with an independent that nobody's ever heard of before. because they don't have the same, brand strength as, of the GSIs. And that's why I think it's important to definitely, consider the independents, absolutely, in the process, but you want to make sure you're choosing an independent that also has that track record of success. And that's really where Raven data comes in, is to help you effectively vet those independents, because not all independents, not all small guys are created equal. Totally. There's some duds out there. But on the other hand, you can, with an independent, get a more competitive deal, a specialist, and be sort of a more of a big fish in a small pond when choosing that sort of environment.
Neil, I think you left me now, but good luck with that. That sounds like a lot of fun documentation there. And by the way, Neil, congrats on your new role, which I saw on your LinkedIn profile. And by the way, I want to make another point clear on my views on this, and I don't want to get it too far into this today. But even if you go with a smaller SI, which I tend to be biased towards, I still believe you should have an independent advisor connected to that project that is not tied to your prime vendor, that is charged with overall audits and project health checks and stuff like that. That's a major theme of my ongoing shows, so I'll get back to that. But I don't think any vendor deserves carte blanche trust by the customer, even after a good decision is made. Maybe it's time for decentralized SIs. Well, I think so. I mean, I would love to see more niche players become more successful. Unfortunately, in the enterprise, we're always battling against money and brand recognition, despite everyone's PR attempts to claim that we're about quality. Thomas says there are consultancies between independents and the GSIs. Yes, of course, there's a lot of boutiques, and Bonnie's doing a lot of research on those, I'm sure. So.
And the independents also include, those with a larger footprint as well. So the global we kind of have to put them in a little bit of a larger category there. But right. When it says global consultancies, those are, one of a handful of firms.
Mark Sweeney says that's because the global SIs pay the software vendors huge amounts of money. The vendors need GSIs as they often have C-level relationships and can open doors to the boardroom. And Mark, I would add, I'm not going to pick on any particular vendor right now about this, but I would add that a lot of the global SIs are more powerful than the vendors they serve. And that's one of the biggest problems, is that the vendors have trouble achieving quality and project accountability in their ecosystems because they cannot hold these SIs to account, because the SIs actually are more powerful than they are. This, by the way, is one of Jared's talking points. So, Jared, if you're listening in your comfortable front porch retirement scenario, then that's for you, buddy. And Josh says the problem with the smaller SIs staying small is that they're all too often acquired. Yeah, well, the acquisition game, yeah, Josh, but I would point out that almost no one is safe from the acquisition game. Look at Slack. You can be a pretty big company, get acquired. Acquisitions are part of the headaches of our industry that we kind of have to live with. But to your point, yes, smaller SIs can certainly be acquired. So, Bonnie, shall we go through some of your top 10?
Yes.
And feel free to keep the snark and comments flowing. But we are going to actually go through what we have here is 10 list that are going to also incorporate some of the trends that you're seeing. So which one do you want to start with?
So let's start with the number one most important question. Did I receive the value that I anticipated for this project? So did I get the end result that I wanted? And we asked that question of our customers, and they can either answer, yes, I got the full value. I got partial of the value I expected, or I did not receive the value that I expected, so it was less. And what we're finding is that it's split a third, a third, and a third. So 1/3 said, yes, we achieved all the value that we thought we would going in. A third said they got some of the value. And then a full third said that they did not get the value from the project that they anticipated. And the correlation there, like the metric that ties in with that is, and this is like no shocker, but the higher the overall satisfaction of a project, the more likely they were to say that they realized value from that project. So that's our number one question. Did you get the value from this project?
And what do you make of those stats?
I think that they are indicative of these enterprise software projects in general. I'll tell you, I think the larger question that every decision maker should be asking themselves is like, did I solve a problem that was actually worth solving? And some of these projects, you get to the end of it, and people check the box. We completed it. We went live. This was our end result, and things like that. But sometimes implementing these systems, people sort of miss the plot in the end because the project takes so long and is so arduous to implement. By the time that they're done, a year later, 18 months later, they have a new problem. So I think a big question, I don't know that anybody can potentially measure this, is, but a decision maker should really be asking themselves, did this technology change solve a problem that was worth solving?
Indeed. And I think the other thing I would take from this information is that success is not a given. I mean, I think we all understand that, but it's very obviously clearly not a given, which really broaches the sort of big goal of this show, really, which is to start identifying much more clearly what the true characteristics of success are. Yeah. From LinkedIn user, you're asking about exactly who the top firms are and their names and stuff. I don't want to waste time on that with the limited time we have left with Bonnie today, but feel free to ping her if you have some questions on that. But I would just point out that the Indian SIs are also a big piece of this puzzle still for a lot of companies as well. So, I'm not going to rattle them all off here, but whether it's the Infosys or, Cognizant or what have you, Wipro, they're out there too. So, and Thomas says, how long after the go live of the product did you ask this question?
Yeah. It really depends. I mean, the quicker that we can get a review done on a project that just went live, the better. But we will take a review up to 18 months in look back. So typically, the majority of these reviews come in a quarter after completion. But we, at Raven, we'll take, if we can vet the person, we do a lot of verification to make sure that it's a legit review and it's a legit person and project. But we'll take something as far back as 18 months if they can credibly identify issues or credibly go through the review itself.
For any who are just joining, we are with Bonnie Tinder of Raven Intel, and you've come at a good time because she's now going through her top 10 telltale metrics to know if a project was a success or failure. These 10 questions are a good indicator of how well you did or not. Bonnie, what's your next one?
I'm not going to go in order here, but I think another really indicative or indicator of success was, did my team stay intact? And I can tell you, when I see a review come in and we ask the question, did your team change? And if they did change, to what degree did they change? A little, a lot, etc. If I see a review that comes in that had a lot of team change, I can almost guarantee the project is rated low and did not achieve milestones in terms of on budget, on time, some of the discrete the discrete measurements that we have. And so if a team is changing during the course of a project, that creates all kinds of problems. And if it's a problem because the SI is changing out resources and things like that, that's when customers really get grumpy. So team change, a big deal.
Yeah, and one really interesting thing about this too is I still see companies that hold back on putting their best people on some of these teams out of a fear that they're going to get recruited now that they've acquired these more marketable skills. And I would acknowledge that as a risk, though I'd make the argument that if you're going to run your company that way, you're eventually going to wind up with a lot of underachievers because you're going to lose good people, but you're also going to attract good people. But do you see some of that coming up as well, as far as like people kind of worried about losing their good people?
Oh, all the time. And, I have, we work directly with the SIs as well. And there's lots of the SIs that don't want their actual consultant names provided. The customer says, oh, XYZ person really was a contributor to my success. I've gotten lots of calls from SIs saying, can we take that off the review because I don't want my good people to get poached. We've worked too hard to keep them. So definitely, turnover is a huge issue in terms of top talent. So in general, what we see is that teams change from the SI perspective about 40% of the time. And 10% of the time, a customer will say the team changed a lot. So not only did I have one project manager, I had two or three and things like that. So in those cases, that's really problematic. I saw Brian had a question earlier about, are SIs going to, see churn as a result of, some of the greater economic, things happening right now. I haven't, impending labor shortage. Yeah. Will SI rankings get hit? I haven't seen that yet. But what I have seen are a lot of movement of consultants from firm to firm, especially like in Q1, Q2 this year.
Yeah, Thomas earlier said he was a fan of agile methodologies. Do the important, urgent stuff first. It's interesting because I don't think that agile as a sort of very strict methodology works in every situation. I think we kind of have blurred the lines between agile as a methodology and this notion of being agile, which is obviously important. But one thing I will say is I'm seeing more and more successful projects who don't wait on the major go lives till the end. Like I'm seeing more and more companies taking bigger risks early on in projects for the precise reason that they don't want to wait years to get the bulk of their key users on board. So it's kind of a trend I'm seeing in my case studies that I do, which kind of plays into Thomas's point.
Yeah.
Brian has another question we didn't get to earlier. As travel restrictions ease, will clients want to see more of their integrators on site? It's kind of interesting. Like that question of FaceTime, we've gotten pretty good at a lot of remote stuff, but then I think there's also things remote isn't as good for.
Yeah, I think time will tell. I think a lot of consultants who are used to traveling are getting sick of being at home. So I think it's almost like the consultants want to be out on site with clients. I think it really depends on the environment of, the company. And if they're moving to, bringing their employees back on site, then I think they're going to want to have more of that face-to-face. But at least from what I've heard from customers is that they like this idea of, remote work themselves. And so, if they can continue on that path, we saw no, how should I say, drop in quality of implementations because of, a distributed work environment last year.
Yeah. And Brian is saying staff won't necessarily get poached if their employers give them a career path and treats them well. Mark Sweeney, who's had a lot of good comments today, has a similar thing. If you focus on making your best people even better, they're constantly challenging them. Positive culture, then your attrition is often fairly low. It's specific to the SME community, and I'm agreeing with all that. But I'm also saying that good companies can handle some risk of attrition because they're good at attracting top talent also. So I just think in general you just have to embrace this idea of, don't hide your best people because that's going to be a huge mistake in the end. Thomas has a really good one for you, Bonnie. Can there really be an ROI on projects after 3 months? Here we go. Put you in the hot seat.
Yeah. And and Thomas, it's a question that we ask. Can I quantify, and this is one of my points, point number 7, can I quantify the business impact that was made? And what I will tell you is, and we ask for return on investment, so a dollar amount. And I will tell you, in general, we don't see a lot of return on investment in terms of hard dollar savings. Now we're looking at things sort of right after go live, so you don't expect to see those hard dollar savings right away, at least in the short term. I think a lot of these projects, though, are, the measurement needs to be beyond just return on investment, hard dollar wise. It's efficiencies, or it's the ability to decrease their turnover rate, or any number of these impacts that a digital transformation for. So you do not see dollar amount wise like huge savings from any of these projects across the board. And there's definitely some that will say that, but I think customers need to look more broadly than hard dollar savings. That what did I gain in this project exercise?
Yeah, I've seen a number of interesting projects in the last year where one of the big benefits was creating a platform where business users were better able in the future to automate their own workflows without having to go through IT, for example. And so that's a good point as far as like, you're not going to measure that after 3 months. That's a benefit that you're going to have to continue to extract and push for, but it's there for you. And in general, I think companies aren't doing enough to extract the value from the modern platforms that they put in. Yeah. But I would think that you would have to measure that more over years to see who's really extracting the most value. But it is interesting, though. I think you still have to try after 3 months and see how far you've gotten, right? So,
well, and you're not going to have the huge, returns early on, but at least you should have those stake in the ground metrics that you're going to be looking at over time.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bonnie, let's continue with more from your top 10 product success characteristics. What else jumped out?
So we started asking a new question this year. So we added one question to our review form. And I wish we had it for, previous years, but we asked the customer the question, how likely am I to buy more software or services after this project, right? And the important thing, and what really was for me why I wanted to add this, is I wanted to see, was there a correlation between highly rated projects and customers willing to buy more software? And no shocker, those who rated projects highest, so a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in the overall satisfaction about the projects, were 3 times more likely to purchase more software from the vendor. And so I want to just unpack that for a second. So highest projects, 3 times more likely to buy more software from the vendor. We talked, and somebody mentioned it earlier, that the GSIs bring in more revenue for the software vendors, and in some cases they're bigger than the software vendors. On the other hand, these sort of measurements, so if they have SIs implementing their stuff that rate higher on a project in terms of overall success, software vendors need to be measuring how much, what's the outcome of these projects, and the most positive experiences that their SIs are delivering, those customers are 3 times more likely to buy more software from them. On the inverse side of the question, if those who rated projects low, so a 7 or less, overwhelmingly said that they would not be likely to purchase more software from that vendor in the future. So it really behooves software vendors to monitor the partner quality that's going on, because that ultimately leads to more revenues for them later on.
Yeah, and that's a really great example of, I remember talking to a vendor recently that's in high growth mode, and I said, the thing that's going to get in your way in the long run is your project quality goes downhill and you start taking on partners that are not as capable to try to keep up with your growth, and you lose track of the accountability that you've had so far. And to your point, it backfires immediately, because now you're not selling any more software. And that's pretty huge now, because it used to be that you sold like a whole suite of software at the same time, but now we're much more in the area, especially in cloud HCM, for example, of customer success initiatives, where you're going to sell a piece of your software and then look to sell more. And so you're not selling your whole suite all at once generally. And even if you are, you're only implementing it gradually. And while you're doing that, you're still vulnerable to having other software vendors with a piece of that functionality come in and say, hey, we've got better product, better partners, better user experience. So if you can't reinforce that, like to your point, you're not going to sell more software. So hopefully that stat's a good wake up call, and I look forward to seeing that question in future surveys as well. It sounds like a good one.
Yeah, for sure.
Brian says software buyers shouldn't re-implement the same tasks and process. They should get consultants who can reimagine work. I think so, Brian, but I would argue even further that software, the proper software, should empower people who can so-called reimagine work to actually implement those new processes without having that be some kind of major undertaking. You should be able to build apps very quickly and build new workflows very quickly that they can help you to actually make that work better. And by the way, read some of Brian's stuff on Diginomica on things like return to work and sustainability, because these things tie in directly. Brian's got a new sustainability piece coming out on Monday that's a must read. So there's a Diginomica plug for you. But anyhow, the point being, the software should empower, not just make it possible to reimagine, but put it in quickly, in my opinion. So open source and Git humming have changed the software vendoring process. Yeah, I wish they changed it more. I mean, I think some people cite this open source revolution. I haven't quite seen it that way, but I do think it certainly puts some pressure on vendors, which is good. More pressure is always good. Okay, we still have some more from your countdown. What do you want to do next?
Yeah. Another question. So how well was the project scoped? And did I have a lot of change orders during the process? And that's one of the ratings that we have. We ask customers, did you have change orders during the process? And 60% of the time, they have change orders.
The dreaded change order.
Yes.
Now, are all change orders definitively evil, or is there a certain percentage of them that are actually inevitable and necessary? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I would say 38% of the time of those change orders, the customer said, hey, it was us that changed the scope of the work. It was not the fault of, an aggressive, partner who, came in lowballed and then, put in 15 change orders to be more expensive. So, 38% of the time that was the customers, doing. And I think there's a lot of things that you just don't know before you start a project. So some change orders, customers that have some change orders, we don't see like a huge correlation between change orders and satisfaction, except in the case of when they answer the question to say we had multiple change orders. When a customer has multiple change orders, there is correlation that project is going to be rated lower.
Which gets to Mark Sweeney's cynical comment. Change orders is how large SIs milk the account, which is sort of what he's getting at. There's a point at which the change order becomes a poor excuse for not having a honest scope of the product in the first place.
Yeah. And Brian's point too, many are due to the vendors not doing the quality proposal prep ahead of time and rushing through discovery, but without a doubt.
Any other insights from that change order stat that we didn't cover? Or did you get it all?
I think we got it all. So
okay.
So I'll tell you the two other stats that are sort of hand in hand sort of measurements, and they're simple measures, right? Was the project completed on time, and was it completed on budget? And we talked a little bit earlier about that. Was it completed on time? And that is not indicative of success on its own, nor is like, was the project on budget? Because in a lot of cases, it's the customer who changes the work, or the customer had something happen where the project got delayed, or they added to the scope of things. And so when they said that project is late or over time, it really depends on what were some of the reasons for that. And if it was because the project was under scoped and the vendor didn't do a proper discovery, that's in those cases that's not good. But in some cases, you got to look at those two measurements in the context of everything else. Because if you got the value from that project and you were late and over budget, provided that you didn't, like, you weren't too much over budget, where all of a sudden that's, red flags to, your leadership team. Getting the value from the project is really one of the most important measurements.
Yeah, I like where this conversation goes with it, because it's like, well, on time and on budget, they're definitely interesting, right? Because you do want to measure that. But like, if I were to say, if you gave me a choice between an on-time project, say with 20% user adoption versus a 4-month late project with 80% user adoption, I'm taking the 80% user adoption every time.
Without a doubt.
But it is still interesting, because you also can't be dismissive about being delayed, especially because maybe it points to what Mark is talking about here, about customers not being educated enough and not realizing lowball prices. And at some point, you do have to get better at scoping out what it is you're doing and knowing how long it will take. So I don't think those metrics are irrelevant. It's just, I would make the argument that they're not a complete picture, but they're still useful. So do you have another one? You said you had a couple more that fit into that group. Did we cover them all?
I think we covered those. I just wanted to add one thing because I just thought of it. And, it goes back to the point about, I don't think customers that Mark makes, customers don't always know and recognize what a lowball price is. I think that really plays into the importance of getting, competitive bids, because then you can look and see, how does this stack up against some other options, and see, is this a true lowball or not? We don't just isolate one project review. So we're looking at overall trends for a firm based on multiple projects. And so we look at averages to say, what's an on-time delivery, what's the rate of service delivery overall for a vendor, based on 25 projects that we have. And it's really those numbers that start to get interesting when you can look at multiple projects, because all of a sudden you can see patterns. And I see patterns with firms all the time, and you can probably guess what they are. But the patterns and percentage on time, on budget delivery, after we have a set of reviews, really does become indicative of the way that they approach their engagements.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting, Thomas's point about how customers not always want to hear the right price. He's seen often enough they initially just go for the lowest price. I find that very interesting, because it's kind of like, if you had to get some important surgery, would you like call your spouse and say, hey, great news, I found this doctor that will do it for super cheap, I'm going to go with the low price. It's like, did you take the expertise of the physician into account? Maybe a plastic surgeon isn't the best for open heart surgery. It's like, and I think with projects, what I'm always looking for is like, do you trust the partner? Do they have the expertise? And what kind of relationship do you have? And it's really sad when you see it comes down to price in the end, because it's like, oh my goodness, I'll bet your outcome's not going to be that good. Anyway, that's just me going off.
Yeah. And we ask a question about, how did you choose the vendor? What were the factors? When price was the only measurement when price was the top driver for choice, those projects are typically done, the overall satisfaction is lots lower with those driven by price, and on time, on budget delivery is always lower too. So there's a correlation when you use price as your main driver.
Indeed. And Mark just made a really, classic point around that you really have to bring the people along with you. And I think you actually have a stat about that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't stat, it was more like the biggest learnings and the wisdom. You have some interesting quotes there. Do you want to share some of the learnings? Some of those hit on Mark's point, I think.
For sure. So another one of these postmortem telltale metrics or questions are, what were the biggest learnings about the project, and can I share this wisdom with others? Okay. And so here's a couple of them that we got this year. I promised John I would bring the most shocking ones
All right.
to the table. So
I'm ready to get shocked.
Yes. So more details. So this is the lessons learned. more details in the project plan and specs in the deliverables. We wanted best practices in what other companies have done or what's worked in the past. We didn't get it. Involving the right people, both on the vendor side and the customer side. And that was a manufacturing customer who implemented an ERP. Another shocking one that we got, and this was their lessons learned, were much was promised and little was realized.
Ouch.
So that was not a positive review that we got this year. Versus, I'm going to give you a positive one. So this customer said, selecting an ERP system that is flexible and within budget can be a formidable challenge. We would be in serious trouble if it wasn't for our consulting firm. As a chief information officer, the time, pain, and cost of implementation was worth it, knowing that they were committed to my success. So in that case, they felt like their consulting firm was worth the investment, and was made that ERP system actually go. So that was a positive one.
Yeah, you had a good one too around statement of work. Feedback around it was easy to agree on a statement of work. I like that one too.
Yep. Yep. It was easy to agree on a statement of work with this consulting firm. They assigned a consultant that was extremely qualified.
Imagine that. Imagine that.
Yeah.
A consultant that was extremely qualified who actually stuck with the project, and it wasn't a bait and switch. Indeed. Yeah, it's good to know that there are definitely some successes out there, right? I mean, it would be a pretty depressing world if that wasn't achievable.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, you look out on Raven Intel. I mean, I would say this year, if I had to just put a broad brush on it, 60% of the reviews that have come in this year have been really positive. I mean, it's very encouraging to see. I think customers satisfied with projects. So in general, I don't think it's absolutely not all bad news.
But lots of room to improve for sure. And I would argue still too much falling back on incumbent software vendors and incumbent SIs as opposed to opening it up. But that's just my particular view. Bonnie, we kind of jumped around in your 10. Did we miss any of them? I'm kind of trying to go through them now to see if we skipped over any.
Yeah, I think we hit the most important ones. But the 10th question that I had, and we can maybe finish with this one, is where do I go from here? And that is, the end of the implementation or the go live is really just the beginning. And certainly that's what the consulting firm is hoping for. But it really is just a part of a journey. And a good implementation is the foundation for success with that software later on. But it's like, okay, so you hit your go live milestone. What is it going to take to make that, adoption rate go from 20% to 80%, and what's next for this project to make sure all of the hard work that you put in doesn't just sort of fizzle out. And keeping that momentum going, it's challenging, but on the other hand, you want to build on the success or fix a failure if it wasn't the best experience.
Yeah, a couple years ago, I'm going to update this post at some point soon, but I did a cloud ERP benefits realization thing that was kind of steps. And it was both inspiring and depressing, because the inspiring part is how much benefits could be achieved in an advanced way. The depressing part was how few companies had realized it, even if they had gone live. And one of the big things I think that comes up now, Bonnie, is that, okay, do our customers thinking about the data platform aspects to this? Like, are they thinking about, well, with this more plugged in software with more users perhaps, and perhaps more sensors tied in, can I get better analytics out of this? Can I start making better decisions? Like, to me, those are really big, important questions, so that when you're thinking about software, you have to think about this bigger context of how can I run my business better and adapt better. And that's, I think, unfolds over a longer period of time. So it's less and less to me about replacing transactional systems and more about like, how do I serve my end customers better in this really heated, difficult market? And it had, I just did a piece today on like, it was a supply chain customer, Mars in this case, that had figured out how to do better demand forecasting by pulling new data on who their end customer was instead of trusting their distributors to give them that information. That's not just a software thing. We're running more modern software, but now we're also trying to extract better data. And then there's a whole AI conversation around that too, right? Around automation. And so to me, that's what gets really interesting, is to start framing these projects in much bigger terms than just, oh, we went live and now our software is running better.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Or, it's the newest fangled, blockchain, or I'm kidding about blockchain, but cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
It has AI.
Yep. Mark says, drive insights, better inform decisions, and adapt quickly to the ever-changing consumer market. It never ends. Well, that's exactly right. And that's good for all of us, Mark, because we do need careers. Not all of us can retire this week like Jared did. So we're gonna need to have careers. I think, Bonnie, you're going to be busy for a while because there's going to be a lot of crummy projects out there for some time to come. There's going to be a lot of poor decisions on services partners that you're going to be able to document, but also hopefully some good ones, and like we can shine a light on customers that are doing this the right way.
We want to give customers a voice to feel like they can inform others, and have leverage if within a project to say I'm going to rate this. And the best consulting firms are ones that want to run toward that transparency. I can tell a good consulting firm from a mile away with how open they are to getting reviewed by customers. And I've seen it all in the last 3 years. I've seen, consulting firms that really don't want to get reviewed at all. But I'll tell you, I've seen many amazing ones that I would recommend to any customer, because they're the ones who will open up their Rolodex and say, like, talk to any of my customers. And it's like those, honestly, those are the SIs that I want to amplify, because I know customers are going to have a great experience if they go with them.
Yeah, and to those who are kind of afraid of that level of transparency, I would just say it's coming. It's inevitable. Just look at every single market. We're seeing the inroads of user reviews and transparent user ratings. So you might as well play nice now and work with a nice firm like Raven Intel, or else you're going to get something more like Glassdoor, where people can just leave bombs in the open domain.
Yeah.
Mark Sweeney says, customer advocacy is everything in this game. Well, absolutely. To me, it's not the only way to make money in the enterprise, but it's the best way to make money in the enterprise, because it's the way where you feel good when you go to bed at night. And so I applaud anyone who's trying to do that. It's actually not easy to do. It sounds easy to be a customer advocate, but when you really commit yourself to it, it's not easy to do in the end. There's a lot of money pushing in other directions. You say about blockchain, do not be afraid. Well, in the enterprise context, if you mean enterprise blockchain, I'm not afraid at all, because no blockchain project has gotten out of the proof of concept stage and into a live production at scale. So I'm not afraid. It doesn't exist. So I'm not wasting time on it because I'm not afraid of it. It's not relevant. When it's relevant, we'll talk about it. Until then, there's a bunch of cryptocurrency use cases you can dig into, and there's probably a LinkedIn Live on cryptocurrency right now after this one, so you can just skip right over from this to that and talk blockchain until dinner time. Bonnie, did we miss anything? Was there anything else you wanted to get across today that we didn't cover?
Wow, John, we covered a lot of ground. I think we hit all 10 and more, and I've loved the insights from Brian and from Mark and the rest of the audience here, because we had a really vocal and worthwhile group of participants in the chat as usual, but especially I think today. Great job. Bonnie, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes just to give our audience members who contributed a chance to get their final shots in. If you have a final question for Bonnie, now is your chance.
Although I'm sure Bonnie, I have a funny feeling she'll be back in the chair again. So this won't be the last time, but last time for a while. In the meantime, I certainly wish you luck on your taking over Jarrett's reins in the LinkedIn group, and that should be fun.
Thank you. And I would say to this audience, please join in the conversation in that group as well. With really your input, because that's going to add to the richness of that community go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing is that Jarrett built those communities up to have some real value, and that's not easy to do in LinkedIn groups. Most LinkedIn groups are real cesspools. So, and hey, Mark, thanks a lot. Glad you were here today. You brought a lot. Definitely make a point of coming back again. I'm here most Fridays around this time. Not every single Friday, because frankly, it takes a bit of prep to do this show, and it's a labor of love. There's no monetization involved in this video project. So
there's not.
Nope. There's no sponsors. I've been asked by many of our partners, like, we want to be on the show, and I'm like, no, this is actually an independent gig because I think we need that in this industry. So, Bonnie, you have some fans. Someone great interview. Agreed, indeed. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for digging into this data with us. And Thomas, also, thank you for being here.
Thanks,
in fact,
Tom.
I will do the formal applause for Bonnie. This is it's not the easiest format on my show, but it's I think it's a good one for those who are up for being in the hot seat. So thanks a lot, Bonnie. Looking forward to what you learn next, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. See you next time.
Have a good weekend.